Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing?
Pretty good. I'm smiling a little bit, little bit behind the scenes stuff. You're about to say we're going to do an episode about when things go wrong, and in the last 10 minutes, we just had
a couple things go wrong.
Strange, technical problems that we let's see, it's like a little bit of an omen, but we appear to have worked.
No, we're gonna plow through it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do a little bit of a different show today. Just you and I, and I thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about when things go wrong at one Bills drive or when things don't work out, and obviously being there for as long as you were, and I was there for a number of years. You have high hopes, high expectations, and things for players, coaches, staff don't always go the way that you think they will. So I kind of wanted to walk through each of the coaches that you were there with, and then maybe how and why it ended for each of them and their staffs, and then maybe talk a little bit about that and maybe some stuff about the players and things that people would want to hear about because everything in the NFL is glamorous, right? There's money and there's fame and there's all that, but there's not a darker side to it, but there's a sad side. There's a human side when guys get let go.
That's it. It's a business run by human beings,
right?
Yep.
So you came in at the absolute height of of the Bills in the late '80s. So by 1997, you're the business manager.
Yeah.
And so a middle level management position.
Fair enough. Yep.
Really. And the Hall of Famer Coach Levy decides that he's going to step down after 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
Amazing.
86.
Jim Kelly had just retired the year before. So you were losing probably the two most visible people in the organization in the span of 12 months.
And don't forget Ken Hall retired too. So many people have talked. I cannot get over the number of people, former teammates of his, that have talked about Ken Hall. And I might have, if not for this podcast, I always admired him a lot, but I can say that during this podcast and the dozens of guests we've talked to, his status in my mind has elevated maybe more than anyone else's.
I'd say
he retired too.
I'd say he and Daryl Taylor are probably the two most revered teammates that people have had.
It's pretty good on each side of the ball, right?
Yeah. So do you remember that when you found out that Coach Levy was gonna hang it up? The 1997 season obviously didn't go real well. Jim had retired and Todd Collins came in, and that didn't work. And then there was Alex Van Pelt and your boy Billy Joe Gunrack and his not knowing the playbook and getting released. So
I'm not sure what was dumber, him to not study the playbook or for him to admit it on
well,
97 Rock.
if you're willing to go to an NFL game not knowing the plays, nothing that you're going to say on 97 Rock would ever surprise me. So maybe take us back to that day and kind of what you remember when Coach Levy retired, and then kind of where you went from there.
Yeah, it was devastating. I mean, we were so small back then that I knew him well. I mean, he treated everyone well. I wrote about that in my book, a lot of things. He did the foreword for it. And ironically,
what's the name of the book?
Thunder Snow of Buffalo.
It's on Amazon.
It is,
and it still might be in the Bills store.
I don't know.
Okay,
yeah, it's in 17 stores. The Bills store was the first one.
Thunder Snow of
that
Buffalo
took it. Yeah,
okay, got it.
Gratuitous, but I since he did the foreword for it, I mentioned I was at his first ever game as a fan in college in 1986.
Yeah, wow.
And I was a Steeler fan. We were playing the Steelers, and I was in like the second row from the top. And it was windy, and I had an injury. That's another story. I was on crutches, so not easy to navigate.
Sure,
in the wind, 80,000 people, and but it was his first game. It was a win, and little did I know, as I was sitting in the stands, that 2 or 3 years later I would be part of the organization with a Hall of Fame coach. So, and then he was even a better person than a coach to me. So, we found out that there was email was still kind of new in the building, but there was an all personnel email that went out that they asked the staff to please join us at 10 a.m. or something in the field house.
How many people were in the staff? That 50?
Maybe. Sounds right. I mean, not including coaches and stuff.
Right. Non-football staff.
Right. Yeah.
Not even 50, probably.
By then, maybe
God, that's crazy to think about.
It is.
So what it is now. So what was your sadness?
Oh yeah,
obviously.
Yeah.
Was he sad or was he relieved?
He was really sad.
Was he?
Yeah. I mean, some relief, but to me, the sentiment that came out. In fact, before here we've been with Cover One when we were doing the program and we had a closing, and it had all the guests that were on it. It was from his retirement speech.
Okay. Yep.
It was just real nostalgic,
Sure.
and he knew right then how badly he was about to miss the people that he'd worked with.
Was it 100% his choice to leave?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Mr. Wilson,
he could have stayed.
Mr. Wilson didn't want him to retire at all. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He was not. I mean, it was one losing season after so many, and for the reasons that you just mentioned, but yeah, we watched and people were crying, and so it was just, but it was good that it was his choice,
Sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think he went because I mean, clearly he came back and he was the GM of the team.
Or 9 years later, right?
Right. So do you think he just saw that without a quarterback, he thought the team was in trouble?
The reason he gave, as we've alluded to on the show and other guests have said, that he said the losing became harder to take than the winning was gratifying, something to that effect.
Okay.
He said it much more masterfully than that.
Sure. Do you think that, I mean, it also, you just lost your Hall of Fame quarterback.
You
lost your center.
Right.
Like, I mean, things were not trending up.
And the stars of the team were in their twilight years.
Right. And then there was the salary cap was looming. Like,
yep.
So was it a foregone conclusion that Wade was going to take over?
He was, it was, because he became the offensive coordinator in defense coordinator, sorry, of course, in 95.
Yeah.
And we had the top defense.
Yep.
We had, great players and Pop and Washington and Bruce Still and Spielman, and but his defense was one of the best in the league. So, and he had been a head coach, so naturally he was the perfect person to.
Did they interview anyone else? Do you remember?
I don't think so. I don't think they had to at the time.
I was going to ask you. So there was no Rooney Rule then.
No.
And so they didn't even who the offensive coordinator was. Oh gosh,
Tom Bresnahan.
Yeah, he left too, right? Because then Wade brought in Joe Pendry.
Right.
Okay, so Wade was kind of the heir apparent.
It just seemed. I don't remember a single person questioning it.
Right. No, I don't either. I mean, he became like the best coach on the staff.
Sure.
The day he walked through the door and turned that defense around. And I mean, that defense was the reason in 95 and 96 that they even made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Exactly.
That was very clear. All right. So we move on to Coach Wade and his departure there, which I'm going
to put some of this on you now. You were there.
Familiar with. I can remember after it was his third season, the team had gone 29-19, had made the playoffs, 98, 99. There was the Miami game we've talked about many times. Then obviously the Music City Miracle. The 2000 season ended in Seattle. We ended up 8-8. It had lost like 3 in a row and then won this meaningless game in the rain in Seattle. Doug Flutie came back in and threw for like 400 yards. It was a sort of silly game. Mike Holmgren was on the other sideline in Seattle. I remember being there because the Kingdome had been demolished and the new stadium hadn't been built yet. So we played at the University of Washington, which is a really cool venue. It's like boats can pull up in the one end zone and it's the steepest upper deck I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
If you ever look at it, were you ever there?
No, I was to Seattle, and the only time ever was 2015.
Okay, so you didn't. Okay, so I remember on the way back
16.
on the plane ride, there was like a sense of relief. Season was over. Get some downtime. I mean, we had been eliminated from the playoffs. Nobody thought we were going to get fired. Like,
were you eliminated though? We were not eliminated. There was a scenario.
No. It was 3 weeks earlier. So we were going to Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It was my birthday weekend, and Wade famously said that we have little to no chance of making the playoffs, and it was like a 1% chance. We would have had to win out, and then the
Colts would have
had to lose, and the Jets were involved, and all these things would have had to happen. And I think on if they would have had 538.com back then, we had like a 1% chance of making the playoffs. And Wade, unfortunately, I mean, he was factually incorrect, but realistically,
right.
So we lose that game in Indy, and the season had just been kind of careening out of control. The Flutie Johnson thing was everywhere. The season just kind of fell apart. It was weird because
who did we just talk to about that said, oh my gosh, we're still talking about that, or we just had
Jerry Ostrowski.
Ostrowski there. Good call.
So the season just kind of fell apart late. We lost that awful game in Tampa. We had won in Kansas City the week before to go 7-4, and that really felt like the Rob Johnson coming out game. He had that famous play where he dives around the pylon, and you're like, man, here we go. And then everybody got hurt on defense in that Tampa game.
Yeah.
We lost Pat Williams, Antoine Winfield, and Sam Cowart in the first half.
All high ankle sprains.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. We
were
winning
Carpenter
that game.
Maybe too.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So the season came home, lost to Miami, And then that Colts game happened, and he caught so much crap from the local media and the national media. And I also felt like some of it was, do you remember the ridiculousness about him not wearing a headset?
We have Tim Graham scheduled to come on at some point,
Yes.
don't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, someone want to ask him about it.
That drove me nuts because if
Right.
you're ever on an NFL side, nowadays, obviously, all the coaches wear headsets.
Yeah.
Back then, he wasn't calling the plays.
Right.
Ted Cottrell was the defensive coordinator. He gave him full authority.
Yeah.
I could understand why you wouldn't want to have it. Anyways, did not expect to get let go. He didn't expect to get let go. The staff didn't expect to let go. I actually remember that we played on a Saturday, and then the rest of the games were Sunday, and I was actually relieved because some team either won or lost that made us not go to the Senior Bowl. We were almost the Senior Bowl coaches because the team with the best record in each conference that didn't make the playoffs, that staff had to go down to Mobile and become the coach. So somebody won or lost. I think it was the Bengals. I don't remember. But that eliminated us from having to be the Senior Bowl coaches. I often wonder now, maybe things would have been a little bit different if we would have been scheduled to be the coaches at the Senior Bowl.
Never know.
So he got let go. We've talked about this on the podcast before. For the assistants, it was like a weird month. It was a month where you'd come in, you have nothing to do, and you're just kind of in limbo. The organization was clearly in limbo because the GM had been let go too. John Butler had been let go after how many years? So it was just this weird time of change and transition. And I didn't see it coming. I don't know if you saw it. You certainly didn't. I know you didn't see it coming. Nobody saw it coming. And that led to, Tom Donahoe and Greg Williams, just a completely different. And Mr. Wilson stepped back too, right?
First time ever he had relinquished the presidentship of the team.
I got through that without swearing or taking 20 minutes. So I'm proud of myself this time. Much better than the last time. I'm getting better. Okay, so Tom Donahoe and Greg Williams are in. I famously am out. Clearly, the organization took 16 years to recover from the loss of me. For a long time, my curse of the babe of the Bambino jinx on the team worked. So maybe talk to me about when Greg Williams left.
It was a bit of a surprise because even though the record was, right there, I don't know, 8-8. You could look it up.
First year was rough. It was 3-13.
Oh yeah, it was a rebuilding year. Everyone knew that
right.
because when Tom Donahoe, they had to cut Bruce Thurman.
Nope, that was the year before.
The year before, yeah. But when he came in, those guys had all been let go, so it was the first year without them, really. You paid for it. You just knew. But then high draft picks
and Greg Williams came in hot.
Oh yeah, like bullhorns,
all the rah rah. Like he was almost like a college coach, right?
Very much so, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
And we've interviewed a couple guys who I think there's probably some eye rolling from the vets. And a little bit of, okay, dude, like,
Yeah, but and so many vets were gone, but the ones that were still around were kind of like
from going from Wade to Greg Williams is about as large of a transition as you can get in the NFL.
It is a stark contrast. Yes, no, yeah.
Did you find yourself? Did you have a lot of interaction with Greg Williams?
A lot, yeah, a lot. It was the first year I handled the coaching relocation, so I work with them very closely, and you become comfortable to them, so. They ask you a lot of things that they normally wouldn't ask, and basically, okay, go to this person for this and this person for that.
Here's a question that just popped in my head. Does he talk to you like a coach, or does he talk to you like a normal person? Meaning, when he's in your office talking about mundane things like relocation, is he in coach mode, or is he just Greg Williams the person?
No, he was not in coach mode. Yeah, it was almost as if wink, wink. You don't understand. I have this persona, but let's just talk as normal people here. We had vehicles, and he's trade vehicles. They were Yukons, and he's like, hey, can I use this for this person? That person, can we use that? I understand you're the guy. I deferred to him. I gave him a lot because, here we are. We got this big change coming. I'm going to lean into it. And I didn't, he was the head coach.
Right. Sure.
So.
And it felt like Wade was the last coach of the John Butler, Bill Polian, Marv Levy. Things changed with Tom Donahoe and Greg Williams for the whole organization, right?
Well, yeah. And Jim Overdorf had been doing a lot of these things during Marv and Wade. But when Tom Donahoe came in, the salary cap was a disaster. It was basically starting over. So they said, Jim, you need to focus like a laser beam on the salary cap, which means you're going to have to defer and deflect a lot of these things, delegate them to me. And so I took on a lot of things like the workers' comp and working with the coaches and the relocation. So I got to know them a lot better than I did. I knew Marv and Wade pretty well, but because we were smaller, but now we were growing, but now I had a role closer into football. So when Greg left, I remember Tom Donahoe actually, hey, let me see. We are about to have Lee Evans on the podcast.
Oh, yeah? When? Now?
Sure. I hope make it next week.
Okay.
He can come on next week.
All right.
All right.
Awesome.
Sorry, I wouldn't have normally.
No.
But that's kind of cool.
He's good enough to interrupt the program for us.
Yep. Yeah, that would be great. But we were on a flight to Dallas for the labor seminar, which was talking about the salary cap. And it was Tom Donahoe, John Guy, Jim Overdorf, and me. We were on a private jet, which is nice. It was really cool for me. And the four of us was there. And I remember we're there, and Tom Donahoe said, all three of you, I want your take on Greg. Do I keep him or let him go?
Really?
And he started with me because I was the low guy in the totem pole. And you've heard this in scouting rooms before.
Yeah.
They ask the youngest scouts first for their opinions because they know.
Oh, man. Is there a worse scenario for Don Purdy than to be put on the spot and have to give a hot take unprepared?
Yep. And I said I would vote to keep him. I think I see enough personally that to me it's too early. But
what was the vote count? You don't have to say who voted what. But, well, obviously, we know what Tom Donahoe's.
Sorry, I'm not good. The vote count. Well, we all know what happened, so we know that I was in the minority.
Were you the only one that voted to keep him?
Though John Guy needed more time to think about it.
Okay. I respect you.
Can you guess the?
I get it.
Yeah.
I respect you for saying.
I didn't hesitate.
If you were not first, would you have? Let's say the other people had gone, and
It's a hypothetical, Josh, so I don't know, but I would like to think my answer would have been the same, but maybe not as boldly.
Sure.
Sorry. Person keeps calling me.
It's tough it's tough when you're first. And he put you on the spot.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, wow. It was smart because I gave him a more unfiltered view than I would have if hey, my boss and John just said they don't think so. So here I am disagreeing. But
did he ever address it with you after he made his decision?
No.
Okay.
No. It wasn't like, hey, sorry, Don.
Yeah. No, but just like, okay. Yeah. So Greg gets let go.
Yep.
Surprise, not surprised in the building? Like, were people
the people that have been there longer weren't surprised. The younger people, I was kind of in the middle, were surprised because they thought he just didn't get enough of a chance, and they really liked his energy.
Okay. What was your level of security at that moment for your job?
I wasn't
1 out of 10.
I wasn't worried. I thought as long as Tom Donahoe, for as much as people want to say about him, and I'm sure there's a lot of ways he could have handled the media better. I never had more personal
or coach's assistants, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. I never had more personal growth under any president that I had under him, and a lot of it was just circumstances.
Fair enough.
Jim had to do more with the cap, and things got delegated to me, and they entrusted me with it, and I did the best I could.
So you're a 9 out of 10 on the job security scale.
Sure, it was up there.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't worry much.
So then Mike Malarkey is hired.
Yep.
Who's clearly different than Greg Williams. It's almost like a pendulum of players coach, disciplinarian, back to Mike Malarkey, more of a players coach.
Yeah, he was a former player himself. He was a tight end for the Steelers and the Vikings. He was a bit younger. He was didn't talk a lot.
First offensive coach they had hired in forever.
Yeah, and Tom was bullish on him. He was like, I have no question. We interviewed a few guys, but I know this is the right guy. And my first meeting with Mike Malarkey's staff, he held over some of Greg's staff, was not so good. I learned something because he asked me to come in and talk to all the coaches. And I just started. And he's like, hey, who's the head coach here? I'm like, got it. And all he did was introduce me. And I just started talking about.
So he had to be the first person to speak in the meeting?
Right. I learned that very quickly.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that was his room.
That was his room, sure. Boy,
Yeah.
I guess I kind of like the people that just it's assumed that it's their room, and you don't have to necessarily. But
yeah, whatever. It wasn't. We still had a really good relationship.
Sure.
It was just I got off on the wrong foot there.
Okay,
yeah.
so he had 2 years, and then he famously quit.
He walked away. It's odd,
and that is a rare occurrence in the NFL. It's less rare now. I think there's a lot more mutual partings of coaches and owners than there were then.
And the team wasn't bad then. We went into the final week of the season. Luke Russert talked about this, with a chance to beat the Steelers and go in the playoffs. So
that was his last game. Was that Steeler game, right? Or did he another year?
I think he had another year.
Okay, so 2004, you're right there.
We had Bledsoe. We had great receivers.
Yep. 2005 is a little bit of a step back from 04, but still, you're not terrible.
Yeah, I don't. That was a head scratcher. Everyone was like, something must have happened between.
Do you know? Was that a Donahoe and Malarkey thing, or a Ralph Wilson thing, or do you know?
As far as I know, it was between Tom Donahoe and Mike Malarkey, which was surprising because Tom was so, this is my guy, and I have no doubt about it. And the team, again, wasn't bad. It was surprising. I still really don't know.
So he chooses to step away. That had to be tough for the assistants.
Oh, very.
Who lose, because it's one thing if you get fired.
Yep.
But if your head coach just decides to quit, man, that's tough, because you're gonna lose your job on your head coach's choice.
Just his decision.
That's a tough. That would be a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yep.
Okay.
It would be because, I mean, your question too, why wouldn't you still want to be a head coach in the league?
Right.
You never know what can happen. We have a great draft, great free agency, and why would you just, what could have forced that? It was a big mystery to this day.
So your 1 to 10 job security when Mike Malarkey got fired in your mind was what?
It went down because Tom Donahoe also was let go after that.
Let's talk about that. So what do you remember from the president and GM getting let go?
It was just with the media. I think it was clear between Mr. Wilson and him that he just thought it wasn't going to work. There were forces in the building working against Tom Donahoe that he.
Like a Sith Lord in Star Wars, right? Like the Emperor in the Senate.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I've always compared certain individuals in the Bills organization back then to like the Emperor in Star Wars, just behind the scenes.
Yeah. There were folks that were having more and more power, and put it this way, they weren't helping him.
You're getting undercut.
He was getting undercut.
Yeah. Were you sad to see him go, or did you think it was time?
I was. There were good people in the building that I loved and admired and respected that were glad to see him go. And there was one staff meeting that, and he put himself in this category too. He's like, all of you, everyone in this room, including myself, has to raise the bar. And I think there were a lot of people in the building saying, "You're suggesting that I'm not working as hard as I could." I am.
Sure.
Like, I don't know what else you want us to do.
You don't directly affect the product on the field.
Yeah, he was adamant about saying you at least indirectly affect it because everything we do helps the team, whatever it is, if it's in free agency or just making someone else's job easier. And it didn't play well. And raise the bar quote became a bit of a ironic mantra.
Sure.
Did
he raise the bar when he drafted JP Lossman? Probably not.
You know what? Again, we're going to have Lee Evans on next week. That was JP Lawson's best game he ever had.
Oh, there you go. Funny.
283-yard touchdown passes in the first quarter against Houston.
Yeah.
And then after that, that was pretty much all he ever could hang his hat on. But
So you're where are you 1 to 10 when Tom Donahoe was let go?
Oh man, it's in the 5 to 6 area.
We're at a 5 to 6. Was that the first time you really feared for your job?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what happens then?
Surprisingly, Marv Levy's brought back as the GM.
Then did you go to 10 to 10? 10 out of 10 in job security?
There,
Okay.
Because I was one of the few people that
Uncle Marv is back. I'm safe.
It was great. We had a meeting.
Were you shocked?
Yeah.
Like shocked.
I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. And I knew he was the first to admit, look, The salary cap is not my deal, Jim. That's your deal, but I need it all broken down.
All right.
I'll make the decisions.
I'm going to give you a comparison right now. And I never do this on this show. And I'm going to ask you to be as respectful as possible. And we don't talk politics on this show. Was he like Joe Biden in terms of figurehead, older? Do you know where I'm going with this?
I do. I know what you're trying to say.
Is that kind of what the vibe? Because people are always curious about Marv coming back as a GM. He was never a GM. He was a fantastic coach, all that. But then it seemed like he was there as the figurehead where there was people behind the scenes running the show.
To that extent, I'll give it to you, a figurehead. He would go on the radio, and when someone would bring up, the salary cap, or he making a decision he would say, that's Jim Overdorf. That's Jim Overdorf. In fact, he actually had Jim on programs to break all that down. The difference I would say between the comparison you're trying to make is that he made that clear with full cognitive awareness that this is what I'm going to be. I'm telling everyone this is what I'm going to be. I will still make the hard decisions, but I need it all brought to me in a way that of my choosing, and I'll make the call.
He was always known as like a great delegator, right? Like, I always remember people saying what a great and he had dealt with all the egos on the team and the coaching staff. Like, I always remember, even as a kid, I remember hearing him. Marv Levy was a great delegator.
Well, and you looked at his first year, he looked brilliant because Marshawn Lynch was an easy selection. Paul Posluszny was a great linebacker for a second-round pick, a very good second-round pick, very solid. Came in, was leading tackler right away in the second year after the injury. And then they had selected Trent Edwards in the third round because Bill Walsh told him we should take a chance on this kid. And he had a really good first year.
Can't fault for a third-round flyer, not a bad pick. Okay.
He played very well. In his second year, he struggled. But
Marv is the GM, and they hire Dick Jauron.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to Dick Jauron? What was Dick Jauron like? I mean, clearly different. Very milquetoast, just plain.
2 years before he'd been named NFL Coach of the Year after being 13-3 with the Bears. Brought on milquetoast. Yeah, he was very a protege. Well, Marv was witty. Dick was measured, like pensive, very kind. Sometimes he talked to you in the hall, like you almost think, for longer. It's nice that you're trying to get to know me, but this is a conversation that
go study some film.
But he was a delegator too.
Sure. Okay.
So he knew he had the good staff. But it became kind of Groundhog Day because we kept having the same season, the 7-9 in the hunt. A team was never bad enough to get good draft picks. It was just, and so when he got let go, it wasn't real surprising. His wife was surprised. I went to help clear out his office and wish him well. He's such a good man. And she came in and she was hot. She was hot. She was really upset.
This is the second time he's been fired in like 6 or 7 years, right? Because he got let go from the Bears,
right?
And now the Bills.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then she was like, you don't know what your team doesn't know. And I'm like, I kind of understood, but we were in, as they say, purgatory. To make a change. So
you missed out on another 7-9 season.
but we were 7-6.
Yeah,
a few times, we had, winning records up until December, and then just lost these tough games and just weren't, good enough to.
So your security level when Dick Jauron gets fired, 10 out of 10, just because Marv's the GM.
Well, no, Marv left.
Oh, Marv left with Dick Jauron.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they let that. I remember I was on the bus. We were in Miami, and I was in the second seat because I always had to get out first, but Chuck Lester always took that front seat for some reason, and we're waiting for everyone to get on. You know Chuck.
I sure do.
So I was just checking my phone. I don't usually do this, but I reached out to a few players today for interviews, and so every time they come through, every once in a while, I'll just go on a binge and ask 3 or 4 guys. So I'm checking. I'm sorry.
So Chuck Lester insisted on being in the front seat, and what was his title at that point? Assistant to the head coach.
Assistant to the assistant, something like that. Yeah, Marv let him continue to have that.
He had one of the most unbelievable careers as a coach in NFL history.
Yeah,
to be with one team for that long under different regimes is unbelievable.
Well, I remember I got I forget how, but on my phone I got a notification somehow. I forget what it was, whether it was a text or Marv's retiring tomorrow. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And Chuck's like, what? And I'm like, Marv's retiring tomorrow. He's like, no, that can't be right. That can't be right. I said, I mean, here it is. And he's like, no. It must just be that he's gonna, just delegate. I said, I don't know, Chuck. We're gonna see. You could hear the panic and
sure.
And it turned out to be
that was it.
He had the writing was on the wall, and he was right, because that when Gailey came in, it was a completely different staff.
So Marv leaves. How? So you're a 5 out of 10. 4? Where are you?
5 is being generous.
Okay.
I was nervous.
Who was in charge after Marv left?
It wasn't real clear.
Okay.
Gailey was the head coach. Russ Brandon was kind of the GM. It was for a bit.
Why didn't Mr. Wilson hire another GM?
I don't know.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm not sure.
So Gailey became the de facto man in charge of
football, but yeah, I mean,
okay.
Okay. No. I'm sorry. That was 2009. I apologize. Correction. When after 2009, that's where I was most nervous. But then he brought in Buddy Nix to be the GM in 2010, and I knew Buddy well when he was a scout.
Uncle Buddy is back.
he was a scout for the Super Bowl teams, and with John Butler, he was part of that group.
Bring back the band.
Yep.
We got Uncle Marv came back, and then Uncle Buddy's here.
Yeah, and I saw a totally different side of Buddy Nix. Like, I knew him as this lovable scout.
With the one-liners.
With Dwight Adams and John Butler, and he came in, and he was transformed into this authoritative figure. Yeah, like, whoa, all right, I hear you. I get it. You have to be that. So he reassigned me to some things, like on the road and at home games. I had to be in the coach's booth with the pictures.
So he gave you even a little bit more responsibility. Okay, so you're feeling good at this point.
Yeah, I'm feeling good now.
Gailey is the coach.
Yeah.
We have
another rebuilding here. We had a terrible start. We had Ryan Fitzpatrick and the TO experiment, it was a 1 year.
Oh, it was 14 years ago today that they gave the keys to the city to TO. And Aaron Quinn on Twitter said something that I completely agree with. Is that the most drought moment of the drought? The fact that you're giving the keys to the city of Buffalo to a guy who's never played for you.
It was embarrassing.
It was embarrassing, right?
It was.
It was embarrassing.
Another thing that happened when we were signing TO back in February, I was asked what my thoughts were on it. Not that it would have any impact, and I didn't like it because I saw a young group come in with Eric Wood, Andy Levitri, and you could see these were going to be good young leaders, and I thought,
yeah, T.O. is just going to take up all the oxygen in the room.
Exactly. It's gonna slow down what this nucleus could grow into.
Yeah.
And I didn't think we had enough talent. He wasn't.
You weren't going to.
He could help us win another game or two, right?
Sure.
I just thought it would slow, and so I wasn't a fan of it, and then that happened. But somebody in our office famously, told me, he's not so famous, but that'll sell out Toronto.
Mm. Yeah, that's a loaded statement in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, like that.
Was that okay? All right, so we're talking about your fear of losing your job. What was your fear in those days of the team moving to Toronto?
It was something. It was there. Yeah.
Did you go to all the Toronto games? Did you hate them?
I hate them at all. I had to work them.
Hated them.
I had all the passports came to me.
Oh, that again.
Okay, yeah. So because I was so good at it, that I had it up.
So good at it.
Yeah, I had to do it for London too. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, so good at
it. I had like dreams and nightmares of them being thrown at me, passports.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, and manifests and trying to get people over the border that had issues.
Issues.
Oh, yeah, that's another show for another time.
So
yeah.
All right, so Gailey is the coach. You have the great start to the 2011 season.
Yeah, now here we go.
The Fitzpatrick.
We found our quarterback.
Right.
We gave him a contract a little bit later, but we talked to Naaman Roosevelt the other day, but
what goes wrong?
In 11, it was injuries.
Okay.
Like we were 3-0, 4-1, 5-2, and then all of a sudden down go Eric Wood, Fred Jackson, who might have been an MVP candidate at the time, leading the league in yards from scrimmage. They were dropping like flies, and we ended up barely missing out. It was such a disappointing season. I think Luke Russard's talked about that too. And then, but you're thinking, okay, it's basically the same team in 12, but in 13, but there was just like some kind of glass ceiling or something, couldn't get past Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think maybe teams didn't take him. They studied him, and he's a good quarterback, but they took things away. Defenses took things away from him.
So were you surprised when Chan was let go?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe. Yeah. Of all of the coaching departures, firings, leavings, whatever, I thought they still had the best chance to still be successful. I was surprised. Yeah.
And that was Buddy Nix and Ralph Wilson.
Right. So now we're back to Buddy's gone. So Russ Brandon's back in the picture. Mr. Wilson's talking to him and basically tells him, you're going to be the lead on the search. And all of a sudden, Doug Marrone from Syracuse, okay. He had good record at Syracuse. I didn't follow him that much. My first day with him was very rough.
So he was one of those that didn't turn off the coach when he was in the office.
No. He was so insulted and like mad at me that I didn't realize that Syracuse had played a bowl game in Yankee Stadium.
Oh, well.
What's wrong with you? I didn't know.
The Pinstripe Bowl is a big one.
Yeah. Oh, he was furious. Like, he was so insulted. And then he would ask me, how do you do this? How do you do that? I said, well, what we've done is this. And he goes, well, not doing it. There's essentially a new sheriff in town. This is how we're going to do things. And he just, okay, all right, tell me how you want it done, and I'll execute it. But so you asked me how it's been done. I'm being honest.
So let me ask you this, so you have a negative interaction with him at first, clearly, and at this point, you kind of already know what he's going to be like, right?
Yeah, it surprised me because total coincidence. The meeting I had with him, the very, very first meeting with him was actually okay. It wasn't bad. Then by total coincidence, I went up to Speculator in the Adirondacks for a ski weekend. It was just a Friday night. Coming back Sunday on the New York State Thruway. I haven't thought about this forever. New York State Thruway. We go into a rest stop, like between Rochester, Syracuse, and Rochester, something like that. And my wife's there, my daughter's there. In walks Doug Marrone. Seneca Falls or something. You can look it up, with his wife, and he's like, "Hey, good to see you. Hey, my wife. This guy, he's gonna be, a key guy for me and helping me. And, hey, I'm bringing another guy, Steven from Syracuse. I can't wait for you to meet him. He's gonna be here tomorrow. Yeah, you guys are gonna work great together." I'm like, and he was like, "Wow, oh man, this is really good for you." I'm like, "Yeah, I would agree." And then the next day, he asked me to come to his office, and it's like that Sunday encounter never happened.
Really?
And he was just going at me with stuff like, "We're going to do it this way. I don't care how it was done before."
Was there like a persona that he felt he had to have on in the office?
It was almost like there was an on-off switch, and he felt like it needed to be on. I don't know. It really caught me off guard.
Right. I bet it's got to be tough then when you have that type of a relationship with someone who is not directly your boss, but is in charge. Yeah, that's tough.
Well, he made it clear he was in charge.
That's tough.
Yeah.
So he's the coach.
Doug Whaley's the GM.
So Doug Whaley comes in.
Yeah.
Right. So he's hired.
He'd been there, but he was promoted.
Were you pleased at that promotion?
Yeah, I like Doug. Yeah. I thought he was good talent, but unlike in my opinion, if I could have advised Doug, he should have been around the building more. Instead, I understand he had Jim Monis as his guy that he was back as the assistant GM. Doug was scouting a lot. He was scouting like the top picks around the league.
He remained more of like a scout than a GM.
Yeah, and I think maybe his presence in the building more could have helped him.
Sure. Okay. So Doug Marrone gets let go. I'm assuming you were.
Dude, I had a Doug Marrone story. I don't know if it's good for today or not. about things going wrong? Do you want me to save that one?
Yeah, save it.
Okay.
Save it.
Okay.
So we're 40 minutes in. We're going to wrap up here soon. We're getting to
it's
the
a really
end.
good one.
Okay. Save that one.
Yeah.
So Doug Marrone's let go. I'm assuming you're not.
Well, was he let go or not? I don't know.
Oh,
it was New Year's Eve after the 2014 season. Again, a couple of you were in the hunt and 7-9 or whatever, 8-8 baby. And EJ Manuel hadn't panned out, and he was still on the team. It was too early to say. He just hadn't yet, played it at the first round pick level. But I remember I was out on New Year's Eve at a restaurant in Orchard Park, a beautiful, snowy, textbook, nice night, and I ran into, was it Jeff Mazurek? I think or his brother. Anyway, we both got a buff all email personnel message on our phones that Doug Marrone was resigning. We're like, what?
Was the champagne great? Was there a toast? Was there a good New Year's Eve?
We had a good New Year's Eve.
Okay, fair.
It was just, but it was really surprising because there was a clause in his contract, which maybe when we talk to Tim Graham, we'll talk about how much he thought that this was crazy. But there was a clause in his contract that there was like $3 million that he could not coach and still take with him.
I remember that. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What?
So he gets let go.
Yeah.
You're feeling 1 to 10 on your job security at that moment.
Good, because Doug Whaley was going to continue to be the GM. I had a good relationship with him. So 7.
So then famously Rex comes in.
Yeah.
How shocked were you that he was a candidate and that he got the job?
I wasn't shocked at all, because the Pagulas came in. They too wanted to kind of make a splash. Yeah. Rex had been to the AFC Championship game with the Jets with a rookie quarterback, a second-year quarterback, had an amazing defense.
And he was kind of billed as like a guy who could beat the Patriots.
Yeah, right. And that's a good point. Yeah, he was. I didn't mind it at all. He came in the opposite of Mike Malarkey. We had a big meeting with the staff early on. We were in a conference room, and I was going to talk to all the coaches about the relocation and some other things. And I was waiting for Rex to tell me to go, and he's like, "Anytime there, Purdy."
Wow!
Like he was just content to let me start the meeting without.
Did you share with him the Mike Malarkey story?
And
why you didn't?
I did actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That
later on.
Yeah. Hey, coach, this is why I didn't start the meeting, because I got scolded 5 years earlier by Mike Malarkey.
Yeah, and it was more than that actually, but it stuck with me obviously. But sure. I remember his reaction was like, "Hey, we're all in this together. We're a team. Okay. We're Buffalo. I liked him." Is he
as likable behind the scenes as he comes across on like TV?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what you see is what you get.
Oh yeah. No.
Okay.
I know he takes a lot of shots and stuff, but where I have to objectively say where things went south was, when Rob Ryan came in, Dennis Thurman was still the defense coordinator, and just oversimplification, I think, just to say the defense didn't know who to listen to.
Right.
It was confusing, and we regressed. We still have a lot of talent on defense, and they underperformed.
It felt like everything kind of got a little bit sloppy.
Yep.
And a little unhinged.
Yep.
Was that even in the building too? Because that can be from the team, from the head coach, but it can also like trickle down into the building and
some.
Not crazy stories, but just a little loose. Like everything just gets a little loose.
Yeah. And but I thought it was recoverable, but apparently I don't think he wanted to make any changes, and maybe the Pagulas were hearing enough from other people that look.
Were you surprised when they let him go?
I didn't know. Because I didn't know the Pagulas very well enough to know how they were thinking, and I know how bullish they were when they hired him only 2 years earlier. So
it was quick, especially for a high-profile guy like that.
Yeah. I was a little more surprised than not surprised.
Fair. Okay, so that gets us up to 2017. Mm-hmm. That gets us to.
I know you're leading.
Well, no, we're almost. We're gonna end there.
Brilliant.
So we get Coach McDermott hired.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of him when he was hired? Were you surprised it was him? I'm clearly going from Wade to Greg Williams and going from Rex Ryan to Sean McDermott is night and day.
I had heard of Sean McDermott. I didn't follow the Panthers that much, but as soon as someone said, "Hey, he's the defensive coordinator with Carolina," I say, "Okay, I've heard his name." They were a very good defense, and then I learned more about him. He was a good coach with the Eagles. I'm like, they know what they're doing. They'll bring him in. I'll meet him. I look forward to it. I could not have been more impressed with him right off the bat. He was, he had it all. He was respectful, but he had like the best of every coaching quality you could have, being respectful of other people, but you still knew it was his room.
Okay. Is he you and him in an office?
Yeah.
Is he as he is on TV?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't say enough about him.
Did he ever say anything interesting? And I mean that in a complimentary way, because he gives nothing away. He's tremendous at giving nothing away at press conferences and that's great. But
he was more candid than he is in front of cameras.
Okay.
Like Barb Evans and I would go talk to him about handling what he wanted done with his coaching staff. And I remember he would go in and he was eating like a salad, but he was asked questions about us.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay. How long have you been here? What do you think? How should we do this? Here's how I'd like to do it. I was just this guy. This is the guy you can get behind.
So before we wrap this up, so he is the coach. And there was going to be an expectation. Did you kind of know that Doug Whaley was going to get let go after the draft?
I didn't know that because we had no GM. And basically, Terry and Kim Pegula were serving as the de facto GMs. And Sean McDermott was actually like the GM from January through the draft. Yes, Doug Whaley was there, and he was doing everything, working as hard as he could. And the night of the draft, after it was over, that Saturday night, I went into I was responsible for tying up all the signings of the rookie free agents with their agents. And I had gotten, like, of the 13 or 14, I had gotten either the sheets back, signed sheets from like 12 out of 14, and the other 2 I had confirmation that they were going to send it to the next day. I felt comfortable enough to say, we got them all. They're all signed. Okay. And I went into the room, and there was a table in the scouting room where on one side it was Doug Whaley and Jim Monis. On the other side was Terry Pegula, Kim Pegula, and Sean McDermott. And they were laughing and joking. This was about 8 o'clock on Saturday night. They were laughing, joking. Oh my gosh, what a great! I think there's a little bit of wine, and it looked like everything's perfect.
Sure,
good for you, Doug Whaley. You're going to survive. Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, I get a text message from Jim. Need you to come in. We had to fire Doug Whaley, Jim Monis, and the entire scouting staff.
So it was like Goodfellas.
8 hours
where they whacked Maury in the car after drinking and playing poker with him all night.
That's right.
Is that a fair comparison?
That was shocking given what I'd seen 8 hours earlier.
So you think Doug Whaley had no idea?
Well, the only reason he might have had some idea is because some scout the week leading up to the draft had apparently told someone at Pro Football Talk that they thought they were all going to get fired. But nobody knew why.
Okay, sure.
Why?
Right?
Oh yeah. So everyone was walking on eggshells that night because of this report. What do they know?
Interesting.
And I didn't know anything.
Right.
When I saw them at the table, I'm like,
you thought he
that was
survived.
A stupid rumor.
Wow.
Turned out to be true.
Wow. All right. Yeah. So we're gonna leave it here, and I'm gonna ask you one. After Doug Whaley, in your own mind, after Doug Whaley got let go. So that morning, you hear he's let go. You're thinking...
I have one way of answering it. It is that it was clearly too high.
We will we'll pick up this conversation on May 30th, which is a special day in Don's life.
Yeah.
And hopefully everybody enjoyed this episode. A little bit different. I think anybody who's been a Bills fan for the last 20 years we'll appreciate that.
Well, Josh, you and I have two of stories. There's so many people that came through. Ours is, I think, pretty representative of what can happen. Hopefully it was interesting. And it got more interesting and different. But
we're gonna leave it there. Obviously,
right.
you left us with the cliffhanger. So hopefully
that's how I roll.
Everybody likes and subscribes to the podcast.
Yeah,
Joe
please.
DeRosa, our guru at Cover One. So please like the podcast, please subscribe, and we will see everybody next week. Thank you.
Sounds good.